Poor girl with brother in her arms in front of the grocery store begs the billionaire. He just needs a little milk. I promise to pay you back when I grow up. What he does next is unbelievable. Adrian Blake's footsteps echoed across the marble floor of the corporate building. His impeccable, custom-tailored suit didn't show a single wrinkle despite the exhausting day. While other executives left the building with expressions of relief, Adrian maintained an impassive countenance, as if the 6-hour meeting hadn't drained his energy at all. "See you tomorrow, Blake," said Johnson, one of the directors, trying to start a casual conversation. Adrian just nodded. Not out of rudeness, but because he had learned long ago that saving words meant saving time, and time was money. The sky was beginning to darken when he stepped out onto the street. A cold breeze blew between the skyscrapers, heralding the arrival of fall in Chicago. Adrian adjusted his coat and checked his watch. 10 minutes to 7. Normally, his driver would be waiting, but today he had dismissed the service. Something inside him called for a walk, a moment alone before returning to the silent mansion he called home. The city lights were beginning to turn on, creating a golden glow that contrasted with the growing shadows. Adrian decided to take a shortcut past the small corner market. Maybe he'd buy something to eat, although he knew he probably wouldn't have an appetite by the time he got home. That's when his eyes caught something unusual on the sidewalk near the market's entrance. A small girl, who couldn't have been more than 5, was sitting on a concrete step. Her brown hair fell in messy waves over her shoulders, and her dress, though clean, showed signs of long-term wear. But what really caught Adrian's attention was what she was holding, a baby wrapped in a faded blue blanket. Adrian slowed his pace, intrigued. The normal thing to do would be to keep walking. Other people's problems were not his responsibility. That's what he had always done, after all. But there was something about that scene that stopped him from simply ignoring it. The girl looked up as he approached. Her large brown eyes had a seriousness that didn't belong to a child her age. Adrian could see the tear stains on her cheeks, but she wasn't crying now. She looked determined, like an adult facing a complex problem. "Mister," she called out, her voice surprisingly firm for someone so small. Adrian stopped, hesitant. He wasn't used to interacting with children. In his 42 years, he had built a business empire, closed million-dollar deals, and faced ruthless competitors, but he never knew how to talk to a child. "Yes," he replied, keeping a safe distance. The girl hugged the baby tighter to her chest before speaking again. "He just needs a little milk." Her voice broke for a moment, but she swallowed hard and continued. "I promise to pay you back when I grow up." Those simple words hit Adrian like a punch to the gut. He, who was never shaken by anything, felt something strange stir in his chest. It wasn't pity. Adrian hated feeling pity. It was something deeper, more unsettling. The baby in the girl's arms stirred, making a small noise. He wasn't crying, just making weak sounds, as if he had already given up on protesting. "Where's your mother?" Adrian asked, looking around, hoping to see an adult approaching. "She's waiting," the girl answered, and without elaborating. "I told her I would get milk for Tommy." Adrian took a deep breath. The city was full of scammers, adults who used children to elicit sympathy and get money, but something in that little girl's eyes didn't seem rehearsed. There was a dignity in those small eyes, a strength that intrigued him. "What's your name?" he asked, crouching down a bit to get closer to her level. "Emily," she replied, adjusting the baby in her lap. "And this is Tommy. He's hungry." Adrian noticed the girl's hands, too small for the responsibility they carried. He saw how she protected her brother, as if she were the only barrier between him and the world. Without planning, without thinking about the consequences, Adrian extended his hand to her. "Come with me," he said, in a tone that surprised even himself with its gentleness. Emily hesitated, looking at his outstretched hand, and then at Adrian's face. In that brief moment, Adrian saw something he didn't expect. It wasn't just distrust, but also assessment. The girl was judging him, deciding if he was trustworthy. "I'm going to buy milk for your brother," Adrian explained, keeping his hand extended. "In the market, right there." Emily looked in the direction he pointed, and then, carefully, she stood up. She didn't take his hand, but she got to her feet, holding the baby firmly. "Okay," she said seriously, "but I'll be keeping an eye on you." An involuntary smile appeared on Adrian's face. The courage of that child was something rare. He gestured the way, and Emily followed him, maintaining a cautious distance. Inside the market, the fluorescent lights created an environment completely different from the twilight of the street. Adrian grabbed a basket and walked through the aisles, conscious of the small steps behind him. Emily watched everything in silence, her eyes registering every detail, as if she wanted to memorize the place. "What kind of milk does your brother drink?" Adrian asked, stopping in front of the dairy section. Emily pointed to a bottle of milk. "That one. Mommy said it's good for babies." Adrian took a bottle of milk, placing it in the basket. Then, without asking, he added fresh bread, a few packages of cookies, fruit, and a bottle of juice. Emily followed him, her eyes widening with each item he added. "Is all of this for us?" she finally asked, her voice betraying her surprise. Adrian nodded, without looking at her. "Yes, you need more than just milk." At the checkout, the cashier looked curiously at Adrian and then at Emily. Her gaze held an unasked question, but Adrian ignored it, paying in cash and asking for everything to be put in a sturdy bag. When they left the market, night had completely fallen. Adrian handed the bag to Emily, who took it with her free hand, still holding the baby with the other. "Thank you," she said, and then she smiled. It was a small, shy smile that lit up her face for just a second before disappearing. But it was enough to have a strange effect on Adrian. Something inside him shifted, like a rusty door being opened after years of being locked. "Are you going to be able to carry all of that?" he asked, looking at the bag and the baby. Emily nodded, determined. "I can. I've carried heavier things." That statement, said so naturally, made Adrian feel a pang of... what? It wasn't quite sadness. It was something more complex, a feeling he couldn't name. "Are you sure you don't want me to walk with you?" he offered, surprising himself again. Emily shook her head. "No need. My mum is waiting. It's not far." She took a few steps back, as if ready to leave, but then she stopped and looked directly at Adrian. "You're a good person," she declared with the brutal simplicity that only children possess. "I'll pay you back one day, I promise." Before Adrian could reply, she turned and started walking, adjusting the baby and the bag with a skill that spoke of practice. Adrian stood still, watching the small figure walk away until she turned a corner and disappeared. For a moment, he remained motionless, as if processing what had just happened. Then, without consciously planning it, he started walking in the same direction Emily had taken. He wasn't following her, he told himself. He just needed to make sure she got there safely. Keeping a discreet distance, Adrian turned the corner and saw Emily walking with determined steps down the dark sidewalk. She didn't seem afraid, despite the time and the area. Adrian followed her, always keeping his distance, entering streets that were progressively less lit and more empty. Finally, Emily reached a small, neglected park, crossing it until she came to a bridge over an urban stream. There, under the partial shelter of the structure, Adrian saw a woman sitting on some old blankets. Her hair, the same color as Emily's, was tied in a makeshift bun. Despite the circumstances, there was something dignified in her posture. Emily ran the last few feet, and the woman, who could only be her mother, lifted her face. Even from a distance, Adrian could see the relief in her eyes when she saw her children. "Mommy, look," Emily exclaimed, placing the bag on the ground. "I got milk for Tommy and other things too." The woman took the baby from Emily's arms and hugged him, before looking inside the bag. Her expression shifted from surprise to suspicion, and then to a cautious gratitude. "Emily, how—" she began to ask, but the girl interrupted her. "A nice man bought it for us. He was serious but kind." The woman looked around as if expecting to find this benevolent stranger nearby. Adrian stepped further into the shadows, suddenly feeling like an intruder. "He didn't ask for anything in return?" the woman asked quietly, but with urgency. Emily shook her head. "No, Mommy. He just wanted to help. I told him I'll pay him back when I grow up." The woman smiled sadly and hugged her daughter with her free arm. "You're a good girl, Emily. Very brave." Adrian remained hidden, watching the scene. The woman opened the bag and took out the bottle of milk. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to open it. Emily sat beside her, helping to hold the baby while her mother prepared the food. It was in that moment that the reality of the situation hit Adrian with full force. Here was a family, a mother and her 2 children, living under a bridge, with nothing but a few old blankets and what they could scrounge. And yet there was love between them. There was dignity. The woman held the baby gently, feeding him carefully. Emily leaned against her mother's shoulder, her attentive eyes following every movement. There was an intimacy in that scene, a bond that Adrian had never experienced in his entire life. He felt a strange lump in his throat, as if something was stuck there. His eyes burned, and Adrian blinked, surprised by his own body's reaction. He couldn't remember the last time he felt like crying. Probably when he was a child, before his father taught him that men don't cry. The woman opened one of the cookie packages and gave one to Emily, who accepted it with a tired smile. The girl nibbled on the cookie slowly, as if wanting to make it last as long as possible. Adrian saw the mother discreetly wipe a tear from her face as the baby fell asleep in her arms, finally fed. She whispered something to Emily, who nodded and lay down on one of the blankets. The woman arranged another blanket over her daughter with a gesture of infinite tenderness. Something inside Adrian felt like it was shattering. His whole life, he had prided himself on his strength, his ability to remain unshaken. But now, faced with this scene of love amidst absolute poverty, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. How was it possible that, in a city so wealthy, a child had to beg for milk for her brother? How was it possible that a mother and her children slept in the open, under a bridge, while he lived alone in a mansion with 10 bedrooms? Adrian had always considered his success to be the exclusive result of his own effort. But now, looking at that family, he wondered how much of his success came simply from the luck of being born into favorable circumstances. The woman, he still didn't know her name, lay down beside her children, arranging the baby between herself and Emily. She pulled the last blanket over the 3 of them, forming a protective cocoon. Even in extreme poverty, she still tried to give her children comfort and security. Adrian took a step back, feeling he had witnessed something too intimate, something he had no right to see. His throat was still tight, and he took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. It was time to go. He had seen enough. More than enough. Adrian walked away silently, taking a different path to avoid passing near the family. His steps were heavy as he moved away from the park, as if he were carrying a new weight. The city streets looked different now. Adrian looked at the luxurious buildings, the illuminated storefronts, the expensive cars, and it all seemed somehow obscene in the face of what he had just witnessed. People passed by him, absorbed in their own lives, completely ignoring that, just a few blocks away, a 5-year-old child had to care for a baby while their mother struggled to survive. The walk back home seemed longer than it really was. Adrian barely noticed the streets he passed, lost in thoughts he couldn't organize. The image of Emily, so small and so brave, holding her brother with such responsibility, wouldn't leave his mind. The city lights shone around him, but Adrian saw them as if through a fog. His world, normally so orderly and predictable, seemed to have been shaken by an encounter of less than 15 minutes. When he reached the entrance of his mansion, Adrian paused for a moment, looking at the imposing structure before him. Never before had he noticed how empty the house looked, even when lit up. He entered the security code and pushed the gate open, feeling a strange weight in his chest. The immaculate gardens, the perfectly aligned stone paths, the central fountain with its crystal-clear water, everything was exactly as it had always been. But something had changed, and Adrian knew the change was inside him. He entered the house and was greeted by the familiar silence. The same silence that, until a few hours ago, he had called peace. Adrian closed the main door behind him and stood motionless for a few moments. The mansion was dark, except for the security lights he had programmed to turn on automatically at dusk. The sound system, which usually turned on with his arrival, remained silent, a setting he himself had adjusted years ago, preferring silence to music. He didn't turn on the main lights. He left his coat on the Italian marble console table in the entryway and moved through the house, his Italian shoes producing a solitary echo that reverberated off the high walls. That sound, the echo of his own footsteps, suddenly seemed different, louder, emptier, as if the house were mocking him. Adrian passed through the dining room, where a mahogany table for 12 had never hosted more than 2 guests at a time. He passed the chef's kitchen, equipped with the latest technology, which he barely knew how to operate. At the bar, he poured himself an expensive whiskey, but the taste seemed bitter in his mouth. With the glass in hand, he continued his pilgrimage through his own house. He climbed the spiral staircase, past the 5 guest rooms that had never been used, the library with books he'd bought in bulk because they matched the decor, the home theater where he often fell asleep while expensive movies played on the giant screen. Finally, he reached his personal office. This room, at least, bore his mark. It was where he spent most of his time when at home, working late, reviewing contracts, planning acquisitions, calculating profits. Adrian turned on only the lamp on his desk. The soft light cast shadows in the corners of the office. He approached the fireplace, an imposing stone structure he rarely lit, not because he disliked the warmth or the sight of the fire, but because he had never thought of it as important. He placed the glass on the fireplace mantel and looked at his own reflection in the mirror above. He saw a 42-year-old man, dark hair with graying temples, an angular face that business magazines called determined and implacable. He saw the blue-gray eyes that employees feared meeting during meetings. He saw the impeccable posture his father had insisted he maintain since childhood. "A straight back makes for a respectable man," his father used to say. Adrian unbuttoned his suit vest and allowed himself a moment of relaxation. He let his shoulders drop slightly. And then, for the first time in a long time, he truly looked himself in the eyes. What he saw surprised him. It wasn't the determination or coldness he had always associated with himself. It was something else, something that looked far too much like loneliness. Adrian moved away from the mirror and sat in the leather armchair near the fireplace. He had never admitted it to himself, but now it was impossible to deny. He was alone, completely alone. He had business partners, not friends. He had employees, not confidants. He had occasional lovers, not relationships. He had a house, not a home. Emily's face appeared in his mind. Those brown eyes, too serious for a 5-year-old. The way she held her brother, as if she were his only protection against the world. The courage in that childish voice. "Mister, he just needs a little milk. I promise to pay you back when I grow up." Adrian rubbed his face with his hands, trying to erase the image, but it persisted. He saw Emily and her mother, sleeping under the bridge, sharing old blankets apart but still together. United, connected by something he had never truly experienced, unconditional love. "I have everything," Adrian murmured to the empty fireplace, "and I have nothing." In that moment, a truth he had buried for years surfaced. His loneliness was not a conscious choice, but an armor he had built over time. Adrian had convinced himself that not needing anyone was a virtue, a demonstration of strength. He had turned this loneliness into something noble, into proof of independence. "I don't need anyone," he had always told himself. It was his mantra, his shield. But now, sitting alone in his perfect, empty mansion, Adrian realized the lie he had been telling himself for so long. It wasn't strength, it was fear. Fear of opening up, of becoming vulnerable, of needing someone and perhaps being rejected or abandoned. The silence of the house weighed on him like never before. Each tick-tock of the antique clock in the corner seemed to accuse. Alone, alone. Adrian stood up abruptly, as if he could escape the weight of those thoughts. He walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. Outside, the city glittered with thousands of lights. In each of those illuminated windows were people, families, intertwined lives, and here he was, isolated in his fortress of solitude. Adrian returned to the armchair and sat down, this time with his shoulders slumped. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel the emptiness that surrounded him. Not just the emptiness of the house, but the emptiness inside himself. He thought again of little Emily, of her courage, of the way she protected her brother despite being just a child, of the simple, direct love she showed. "I don't want this anymore," he said aloud, surprising himself with his own words. Adrian stood up and looked once more at his reflection in the mirror. The mask of coldness and control had fallen away, revealing the lonely man behind it. "I don't want to live like this anymore," he stated, this time with more conviction. That night, for the first time in many years, Adrian Blake admitted to himself that he was tired of his perfect, empty life. tired of the loneliness he had built around himself like an impenetrable fortress. And more importantly, he decided it was time for a change. Adrian woke up before his alarm. For a few seconds, he lay still, staring at the white ceiling of his bedroom. The decision he had made the night before was still firm in his mind. He got up without his usual email check. He took a quick shower, put on jeans and a simple shirt, clothes he rarely wore, and went down to the kitchen. He made coffee and, while he drank it, made a mental list of what he needed to buy. For the first time in years, Adrian Blake started his own car instead of calling his driver. The black Audi pulled out of the garage and headed toward the shopping center, which opened its doors at 8 in the morning. In the supermarket, Adrian pushed a cart through the aisles with a determination he usually reserved for important negotiations. He filled the cart with non-perishable foods, fruits, vegetables, meat, milk, bread, cookies, and juices. In another section, he added personal hygiene products, soaps, shampoos, toothpaste, toothbrushes, diapers for the baby, wet wipes. The cashier looked at him curiously as he checked out with 2 full carts, but Adrian kept his expression neutral. He paid in cash and asked for help to take everything to the car. His next stop was a department store. There, he bought new blankets, sheets, towels, cans, and pillows. Then, he headed to the clothing section. He hesitated in front of the women's clothes, unsure of what sizes to choose. He opted for basic pieces in various sizes, pants, blouses, light jackets, socks, and underwear still in their packaging. For the children, he selected colorful outfits, a dress for Emily and onesies for the baby. By the time he left the store, the trunk and back seat of the Audi were completely full. Adrian looked at his watch. Almost noon. He hadn't told his office he wasn't coming in. For the first time in his career, Adrian Blake was completely ignoring his professional responsibilities without prior notice. And, surprisingly, he didn't care. The way to the park where he had seen the family the night before looked different in the daylight. The streets were busier, the abandoned buildings more visible, the reality of urban poverty more evident. Adrian parked the car at the entrance to the park and looked around, trying to remember the exact path to the bridge. He walked slowly, carrying 2 heavy bags, the first of many he would have to retrieve from the car. As he got close to the bridge, he slowed his pace. Suddenly, he felt nervous. What if they weren't there anymore? What if they had left, found another place? Or worse, what if his intrusion was not welcome? Adrian paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and continued walking. As he approached the exact spot where he had seen the family the night before, his heart raced. They were still there. Anne was sitting on the same old blankets, feeding the baby the rest of the milk he had bought. Emily was quietly playing with a small stone, drawing shapes in the dirt. It was Emily who saw him first. Her eyes widened in recognition and surprise. She nudged her mother and pointed in Adrian's direction. Anne raised her head. When she saw Adrian approaching with the bags, her expression shifted from surprise to a mixture of suspicion and hope. Adrian stopped a few feet away, not wanting to invade their space. "Good morning," he said, his voice sounding strangely formal. Emily stood up and took a small step forward. "It's the man from the market," she said to her mother, although Anne had clearly already recognized Adrian. "I'd brought some things," Adrian explained, lifting the bag slightly. "Oh, there's more in the car?" Anne adjusted the baby in her arms and stood up as well. She was shorter than Adrian had imagined, perhaps from always seeing her sitting down. Her brown hair, just like Emily's, was tied in a makeshift bun. Despite the circumstances, there was a dignity in her posture. "Why?" she asked, her voice low but firm. Adrian hadn't expected the direct question. He thought for a moment before answering honestly. "I'm not sure, it just felt like the right thing to do." Anne studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decipher his true intentions. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you," she said simply. Adrian placed the bags on the ground. "Have this food, cleaning supplies, some clothes. I'll get the rest." Before Anne could answer, Emily approached the bags and looked at Adrian with the same serious eyes from the night before. "You came back," she stated, as if it was something extraordinary. "Yes," Adrian replied, feeling something strange in his chest as he looked at the child. "I came back. I told Mommy you were a good person. Adrian didn't know how to respond to that. He mumbled something about getting the rest of the things and walked back to the car. He made 3 more trips, bringing all the bags. With each return, he found Emily and Anne carefully examining the contents of the previous bags, their faces showing a mix of relief and disbelief. When he finished bringing everything, Adrian stood there, unsure of what to do next. Part of him wanted to leave immediately. He had done his good deed, he had helped. But another part, a part he barely recognized, wanted to stay. Anne approached him, still holding the baby. Her face showed embarrassment, but also genuine gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice almost a whisper. No one has ever done something like this for us." Adrian felt a lump in his throat. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do," Anne insisted. "My name is Anne Miller. This is Emily, and the baby is Thomas. Adrian Blake," he introduced himself, extending his hand in a formal gesture that felt strange given the circumstances. Anne hesitated for a moment before briefly shaking his hand. Her touch was light, but Adrian noticed the calluses on her fingertips, hands that knew hard work. I should go," Adrian said, suddenly uncomfortable with the intensity of the gratitude in Anne's eyes. "Of course," she replied quickly, taking a step back. "You've already done much more than—" "Aren't you staying?" Emily interrupted, sounding disappointed. Adrian looked at the girl, at her hopeful eyes, and felt something inside him break. How could he explain to a child that he didn't belong here, that his life was completely different, that he was a lonely man who barely knew how to interact with other people, let alone a family in need? "I can't right now," he finally replied, "but I'll come back to see how you are." He hadn't planned on saying that. The words just came out. Emily smiled, a smile that lit up her small face and made Adrian feel that strange pressure in his chest again. "Promise?" she asked. "Emily," Anne gently chided, "we can't ask Mr. Blake for anything more. He's already been too generous." Adrian looked from Anne to Emily, and then to the baby in his mother's arms. He took a deep breath. "I promise," he said, surprising himself again. He said goodbye with an awkward wave and walked back to his car. The entire way, he felt Emily's eyes following him. When he got into the Audi and started the engine, he looked in the rearview mirror. Emily was still there, a small figure by the bridge, watching him. Adrian drove aimlessly for the next few hours, trying to understand what was happening to him. Why did he care so much about this family? Why did the sight of a mother and 2 children living under a bridge affect him so deeply? And why had he promised to come back? That night, lying in his king-size bed, Adrian couldn't sleep. The image of Emily, Anne, and little Thomas wouldn't leave his mind. The contrast between his empty mansion and that family's situation was so stark, it was almost obscene. The next day, Adrian went to the office but couldn't concentrate. He cancelled 2 meetings and spent most of the time looking out the window.